coming up on Garden Talk.
Did you know that plant roots can hear water? And also, plants have a memory. Every color penetrates and gets captured by the plant differently. You'll get more sites that can get more light. So you're getting more photosynthesis. The leaves are getting bigger, capturing more, and you're getting more nodes hitting to where there is light. His studies show that infrared, in the presence of other colors, does cause photosynthesis. I don't really like DLI for indoor just because it's so hard to calculate. I think what we're trying to do as humans is pinpoint one thing about the plant and just say we know what happens when really there's every color does something different. There's different systems in the plant, there's different receptors, all sorts of things going on.
What's up, everybody? For you that don't know me, my name is Chris, aka Mr. Growit, and you're tuned into the Garden Talk podcast. This is episode number 58. In this episode, I interview Dan from the Green Sunshine Company. He gets deep into lighting science in this one. He talks about photoreceptors, DLI, PAR, ePar, BPAR, UV, IR, and so much more. Thanks to all of you who support this podcast through Patreon. If you'd like to support, you can do so by going to patreon.com/MrGrowit. Before we get into it, I want to acknowledge that one of my goals for this podcast is to bring zero cost for information about gardening, all plants, to the general public. That being said, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's episode who helped make that goal possible. AC Infinity is a sponsor of the podcast. Coupon code MrGrowit will get you a discount on their products. I've been using their Cloudline T6 and T4 inline fans for several years now, and I absolutely love the automation built into them. On the inline fans controller, you can have set points for high and low temperature, as well as high and low humidity. This greatly helps control my indoor garden environment, so the temperature and humidity stays in the ideal ranges. I will leave a link to AC Infinity down in the description section below, and don't forget to use coupon code MrGrowit for a discount on their products. Thanks to Dutch Pro for sponsoring this podcast. Dutch Pro products are now available in several countries across the world. For those of you that don't know, Dutch Pro is a plant fertilizer company that has base nutrients, additives, and pH regulators. They have different formulas of base nutrients for if you're in soil or if you're in hydro or cocoa. They also formulate their base nutrients for if you're using hard water or if you're using RO or soft water. I will leave a link to Dutch Pro's Amazon store down in the description section below, and you can use coupon code MrGrow10DP for a discount on their products. And we are back. Welcome to the Garden Talk podcast. Today I am joined with Dan from the Green Sunshine Company. How you doing today?
Doing great. How are you?
Doing good. Good. Thanks for asking. We have an action-packed episode for you today. We're going to talk all about lighting. We're going to talk about things. I've had some lighting experts or lighting enthusiasts on my channel in the past, and really got some great information from them. This one is definitely going to have some new information as well. A lot of you may know Dan from the Green Sunshine Company. I've been running his lights since they first came out. I think it was like 2018, I believe. I've been running the ES300 and also the ES180. They had multiple versions of those lights, which I'm sure we'll get into later on. You know, they have V1, V2. Now it's on the V3 version. Awesome light. And then you also may know him from a couple videos we did together. So we did most recently, it was probably about a year ago now, we did an episode on just a quick video talking about security cameras. They emit IR light. So a big question was, is that impact plant growth? So that one actually did really well, over 21,000 views on that one. And then the one before that was at MJ BizCon, where we did kind of a sit down there, and we talked about lighting and different spectrum and how it impacts plant growth and so on and so forth. That got over 193,000 views, so that one really popped off. So you're pretty famous about those two videos. So I'm sure there's quite a few people who know you are. So, but let's get into, for those that don't know who you are, how about an introduction? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into gardening?
Yeah, well, my name is Dan. I founded the Green Sunshine Company in my living room and basement uh, like 5 or 6 years ago, and I didn't really intend to get into lighting or nutrients or anything that we're into now. Really, I just kind of knew I liked gardening, and that started with my grandfather. He always had a tomato garden in his backyard, tomatoes. He was the one, he was feeding me juice. I don't know if you guys ever had vegetable juice, but he was always like, "Here, Daniel." They called me Daniel when I was a kid. You know, carrot juice or celery juice, and that's carried with me for a long time. So that was a good imprint. And then my grandma actually was she was like an Apple expert, if you think about grandma computer expert. So I got this like technical and gardening thing that fused together. But really, I didn't garden myself for a while until I was living in a tropical state, and I was hanging out at a bar, and this story is kind of how I got started. And I'm talking with this guy, and he like invites me up to his apartment to like see his garden, and I'm like, and it's nighttime, so I'm just like, okay, I didn't know anyone in the town, and I was like, I just go see whatever this guy's garden is, and like I'm fully expecting to see something illegal at the time, but it was not. It was legitimately, he just showed me his balcony nighttime garden. We tried, he had like peppers, tomatoes, and then he had, what else did he have? He had like I forget what you call it. It's that fruit where you eat it and like it goes, like your mouth can only taste sweet instead of sour. There's like that. There's a special fruit that does that. Anyways, he had that, and that kind of opened my eyes to the fact, like, oh, like you can garden on your balcony. So I tried it with some peppers. Didn't work out too good. I started reading Square Foot Gardening, and when I went to Oregon, I had some yard space, and I was able to unsuccessfully grow outdoors for a while. Eventually, I got pretty good at it. And I've been doing that for like maybe a decade. I've been kind of punking around with outdoor gardening, and then I went indoors about I don't even know the number of years, maybe 6 or 7. Became legal in Oregon, and I needed to grow for my family, and that's kind of when I started doing the indoor stuff. And then my little technical mind got into lighting. Way back in the day, if you look at the Wikipedia article for photosynthesis, I actually was angry because everyone was saying that red and blue light was the only thing that plants used. And I was like, no, they use green, they use infrared. They like I've seen the plant studies, like it works, guys. And like way back in the day, we finally got over the red and blue red and blue hump, and then recently we're getting over the infrared bump. So and like that's basically how I started with the electric sky. Is I found what I thought was the best spectrum. We use custom diodes that creates a smooth response, and that's kind of how I started in my gardening career, and then we went on to we made earth dust. That's our other product. So that's it, start to finish. I started with my grandfather, and then some random guy in a tropical state showed me his balcony garden, and I started growing outdoors, indoors, and then now here we are.
That's awesome. Yeah, like I mentioned to begin, is we've known each other since 2018, I believe, is when we first.
Hmm.
2017, I think it was at MJ
Yeah,
BizCon,
yeah, that was cool. Yeah,
and
I remember. Yeah, it
yeah,
was like one of those things like you see like a famous person because you see him on video and you're like, hey, I know you, and then you're like, no, I don't, and then yeah, so it was one of those things. So yeah, it was fun.
and now you're the famous one. You got a YouTube channel now, which I'll actually link it down in the YouTube description section below.
Yeah,
The Green Sunshine Company. Tell us a little bit about what you have on the channel. I mean, there's a ton
yeah,
of information on lighting and also how to grow as well, right?
exactly. Yeah, we have a just did a how to grow series from start to finish. We did 2 live broadcasts or a few live broadcasts where we did live Q&A. So we've got one with Earth Dust. And then one that's broken up that's not about Earth Dust, it's just with Electric Sky. It brings you through the entire process of growing, or at least how we do it. So if you're just looking for a guide of where to begin, especially if you're using our products, you can use that. And then we have a bunch of ones like on Earth Dust, because really like I recently got really into the science of growing in soil and how all that works. So we were not talking about that today, but we could talk a lot about bacteria and fungi and the mycorrhizal forms and all that. So, but today is about lighting. And actually, I should be covering a lot in this interview that I haven't really covered in any of my other videos before. So letting it all out in this one.
Sweet, some exclusive material.
Exclusive, man.
So let's start with the basics. I'm going to ask you a very basic question, but I'm sure it's going to have a very complex answer, which
It
is
will
so,
probably.
how do plants interact with light?
That's the age-old question, right? Um, Before I answer that question, did you know that plant roots can like hear water? You know, they'll like go towards it. They can like hear, they've done studies about this. It's crazy. And also, plants have like a memory. They do. Like they will remember like sounds and air movements and react in certain ways. So they're way smarter than you think, probably smarter than you, and they're probably so smart they don't even know it. So light is just something totally different, and it's amazing because we can measure light, sense light. We can take the light and put it on top of the plant, side of the plant, change the color, change the intensity. It's kind of like our way of really interacting with how the plant works. And really, this started to accelerate when LEDs came out because finally, instead of taking like old stage lighting gels and like changing the color that way, we can identify LED wavelengths, and that's actually right around when LEDs came out. They could only make red and blue. That correlated with one of our plant studies that recognizes what chlorophyll absorbs, just absorbs, which is red and blue. So they're like, hey, LEDs make red and blue really good. Look at this. We got a chlorophyll graph, and look, bam, it can grow. Therefore, plants only use red and blue light. Like that's where purple LED lights came from. So if you're ever wondering how on earth did we get all these purple LED grow lights, it was a combination of technology and our limited understanding at the time of being able to really adjust that. So when I started, as I mentioned before, I saw the photosynthetically active radiation guide in Wikipedia. It was talking about red and blue lights, and I think I put in there like plants use green light to grow because we have this range called PAR, right, which is the photosynthetically active range. So that was one of my first kind of breakthroughs. I was thinking that, green light, it's not picked up by chlorophyll, but it does get absorbed by the plant, but it's used for photosynthesis. And really, like, I think what we're trying to do as humans is pinpoint one thing about the plant and just say we know what happens when really there's every color is something different. There's different systems in the plant, there's different receptors, all sorts of things going on. So, if you want to disregard everything that I just said, I'm going to break this down for you with a. I actually did a video about this called "Plants How Plants Use Light." I'll break it down right now and I'll add some a little extra information. So, how do plants use light? Uh, there's a three-step way to remember this. It's CPR, like resuscitating somebody. CPR. It stands for capture, photosynthesis, react. So that's the three ways plants interact with light. So if you want to stay with me, this is going to be a longer answer. I'll give some more information of what I've learned since that video and add it into the interview now. So first is capture. Obviously, for plants to do anything with the light, it has to capture it, it has to get into the plant. So how does that work? Well, if you think about, a plant going like this, it's growing branches out, it's growing leaves. Through the vegetative process, it's growing, it's seeking out where light comes from, and it's making a structure, right? So that's how it captures light. So obviously, how big the area, like the leaves, how big they are, that's how much light it can capture. Everything else is not hitting the plant, is not getting used. Uh, and another thing to think about is direction, right? And a lot of people don't think about this. There's a lot of videos out there where people are testing grow lights by just taking a plant meter and going like this and only seeing the light that comes from above. But really, light is bouncing around, it's getting under the plant, and the plant is a 3D object, right? So if you measure the light output from up at top here, it's not going to be the same down here at all. It's a 3D object, and light's coming from multiple directions. So you've got all of this different capturing going on. So it's really, again, where the plant is, the direction of the light, if it's getting in between the leaves or not. And the last thing is color. This is really fascinating. You probably don't know this, but every color penetrates and gets captured by the plant differently. So let me do like a little cross section of a leaf right here. So pretend the leaf is like in here. So red and blue light will actually mostly get blocked, especially narrow band LEDs. If you just have red and blue light, it usually hits the top layer of the leaf cell and stops. So if all of your light is concentrated on the red and blue, this top layer will be like just absorb, like glowing with light, and the rest will be pretty dark. So what will happen is that's why those red and blue lights give you plant, what is it called, photo bleaching a lot, because that narrowband red and narrowband blue are concentrated, getting absorbed in a really small area of cells. So those cells get overworked. So that's why those peaks, even though it's really efficient, you can cheat on making a grow light really efficient by using those. To the plant, it's getting absorbed at the top right here. Now, if you think about other colors like green, yellow, those will penetrate a little deeper into the leaf. So this is just the leaf, and it's glowing more of the leaf. And then when you get into infrared, infrared will actually go through the entire leaf. So it's capturing, it's hitting actually more of the plant. Because you think about there's another leaf down here that's going to be getting green and infrared. So it's capturing it in multiple different ways. So that's C, capture. So we've got, it's 3D, got direction and color. Okay. So C. Now we're on to P, photosynthesis. So CPR, P, photosynthesis. We just did capture. I want you to stay with me. So P stands for photosynthesis. Now, how does photosynthesis happen? Well, if you don't know about plants, they use water, right? And they use air and light to make all the magic happen. So they're bringing up water to the leaves, and something amazing happens in the leaves where, if you heard about plants breathing, they're making CO2 and oxygen. So what's happening is they're splitting water out, oxygen and hydrogen. I don't know how that part works. And then they make something called ATP, which is an energy source. Okay. There's actually two specific things in the plant that are called two photosystems that do this in the plant. That's how photosynthesis works. So if you want to sound really smart, you can say, I know how the two photosystems of the plant works, splits water to make energy and makes this chemical called ATP, and that's how photosynthesis works. And here's how it interacts with light. And it relates to Dr. Bugby's recent findings with infrared of why infrared is important. So there's two photosystems, right? And they were first discovered by a man named Dr. Emerson. So Dr. Emerson was like, hey man, like I know we got this PAR range, which is just blue to red, but if I give a plant infrared light and red light, it like gets this boost in growth that's greater than the two. It's like 1 + 1 = 3 instead of 2. Usually not that dramatic, but that was the Emerson effect. And the reason for that is you have photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. So photosystem 2 I call the engine, and photosystem 1 I call the supercharger. So if you think about a car, so if you just turn on the supercharger, nothing's going to happen, which is infrared light. And if you turn on the engine, well, something's going to happen even without the supercharger. So photosystem 1, supercharger, photosystem 2, engine. And what the engine does, it absorbs blue through red. And then what the supercharger does is it absorbs red up through infrared. Okay? So that's why if you give it both things, it's going to work, the engine's going to work better, more growth. And they're linked together. First one splits water, second one makes ATP, but this one flows into this one automatically. So that's why you don't need infrared. But if you give infrared to the plant, it makes the growth go easier, quicker with the two photosystems. So just remember, photosystem 1, photosystem 2, photosystem 1, the supercharger, photosystem 2, the engine, blue to red, and this one goes through infrared, and that's why the Emerson effect works. And that's why the PAR range is outdated, which we'll get to a little later. But the PAR range was made in 1970. So we did C, we did P, and now we're on to R, which is they react. So plants react. The two ways they most generally react is to intensity and color. What a lot of people don't realize is the intensity actually can determine how big the plant gets. So if you have a low intensity light, they'll get stretchy, right? And if you have high intensity, they'll stay compacted down. That's why in veg, I like to have my light far away at a high brightness, because what will happen is that plant will stay bushier. And I'll get into this a little later, but you get kind of more of a wiggle room with play because light dynamics are more even when the light's further away, like the sun. But anyways, they react to intensity. The second thing they react to is color, and we'll get into more of this later. But the makeup of the spectrum, really matters with how the shape it grows, the yield it grows, the types of compounds it produces, the color all matters. So just to recap, CPR, capture, photosynthesis, react. That's how plants interact with light.
Now, how about photoreceptors? What are those, and how is plant growth impacted by them?
Yeah, photoreceptors, it's basically a plant's way of seeing, like with their eyes, a certain color or a combination of colors. So that's really what they are.
And then there are two types of photoreceptors, is that right?
There are a few. There's for blue light. I made a note because I don't remember them all, but there's cryptochromes, phytotropins, ZTL, FKF1, LKP2. Now, I don't know what all these do, but there's a lot with blue light and UVA light where they can sense that. A good way to kind of visualize this in your head is if you give a plant no blue light, it will not think that there's any light around. So if you just made a grow light, no blue light, it's going to stretch extraordinarily because it's not going to have that signal that it normally gets that here is the presence of light. It's going to want to stretch. So if you add blue light, it's going to say, okay, this is the direction of where the light is coming from. And also, the more blue light you add, generally speaking, the tighter internodal spacing the plant has, the smaller the leaves get, so it makes the plant more compact. So that's an example of one photoreceptor system. And the second one that's pretty common is the phytochrome system, which is like the biological on and off switch. So if you ever wondered how your plants know it's bedtime, well, it's a phytochrome system. And here's how it works. It's actually really, really cool. So it's called, there's P and then PFR, which, I'm not going to get into it, but there's a far red one and a red one. Okay, so I want you to visualize the lights are on in your grow room. The red tank gets full. Okay, and now the lights go off. Click, and then this is what happens over a period of about 2 hours, and then this gets full. And what that means is the plant goes, it's nighttime because this chemical reaction occurred. So red, far red over 2 hours. And what you can actually do is daytime, lights turn off. You can give the plant just far red, and this switch happens sooner. So I've seen research where people can give the plant a ton of far red light and reduce the darkness period because this reaction actually needs to occur for about 10 hours for the plant to realize, hey, it's nighttime. That's why you need that 12 hours of off. So hypothetically, if you sped this up, you could get away with 11, 13 hours, but I don't think it's that reliable. So it's like kind of one of those things. So, and this also, what it does, it detects the amount of red and infrared in the environment. And I'll get into this later, but that's that system that does that. So if I just described the two main groups of photosystems, like the blue and the red and the infrared, okay? Now, there's another thing I want to throw at you. There's a way to bypass both of them to give the plant color that it can't even detect, which is green light. So that's why in the beginning of plant science, people are like, well, I go in my grow room with a green light on. It doesn't wake them up. Therefore, plants don't use green light. They just use red and blue. Like that was kind of like a thing in people's heads. But really, you're just bypassing the photoreceptors of the plant. It'll ironically absorb it, use it for photosynthesis, but you're bypassing the red and blue and you're bypassing the blue and the red and far red with the green light. So that's why you can go into your grow room at night with the green headlamp and it's not waking up the plant because it's blind to it, even though it uses it for growth. So that's something fascinating about photoreceptors in the plant.
You mentioned a few light cycles there, and I want to get a little bit deeper into it now. So, some people give 0 hours of darkness, right? They run their
Mm-hmm.
grow light 24 hours a day. Other folks, for veg stage, some people do 18 hours on, 6 hours off. Some people do 20 hours on, 4 hours off for veg. And then when they go to flower, there's a couple different light cycles that people traditionally do, which is 12 hours on, 12 hours off, or 11 hours on, 13 hours off. What light cycles for veg and flower do you generally recommend, and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. The plant research I've seen, when plants get damaged, they need a off time to recover. Plants they switch between what they're exhaling and inhaling when the lights are on versus when the lights are off. And I'm not an expert on this, but there are different flows in the plant that occur when the lights are off. So in my mind, unless you're like a super pro and the zero works for you, that dark period is a time for recovery and reorganizing of the plant, and so it can be healthier with that off period of time. So 18 on, 6 off for veg is what I'd recommend. For flower, 12-12 is pretty standard. If you want to play around with infrared, you can maybe shave an hour off of your nighttime cycle to give it more DLI during the day. And really, the only reason you need the 12 hours off is because of that time where the plant needs to think it's fall time. So that's why that 12 hours off is necessary. The on time really doesn't matter so much. And then in terms of autoflowers, a 18 on, 6 off, 20 and 4 can be helpful because you don't need it doesn't have that sensing to make the flowers happen. So it does not sense night and day. That's why autoflowers you can kind of move through the cycle. I'm not an expert on autoflowers, but that's a whole nother like topic of niche. I believe you have some videos about it, so go watch some Roots Grow It videos about autoflowers if you want to know how that works. But if we're generally speaking, normal photoperiod plant, which senses night and day, 18 on, 6 off for veg, and then 12-12 for flower.
Okay, gotcha. I want to talk about measuring light.
Hmm.
There's different ways to measure light, right? Some people will get a PAR meter and they're like, oh, measure the PAR. And they think that's it, right? They go after that number and that's all. But there are different ways to measure light. Talk to us about that in terms of like color and wavelengths.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of different light measurements out there, and it gets very confusing. So I want to break down the different types, and then we'll talk about the color. So first, there's the color output that you are measuring. So when we say PAR, what that means is red to blue. Okay, so that's just the range of colors you're measuring. And the range of colors of PAR was defined in the 1970s, limited plant research. Okay, we'll get into that a little bit. Then there's the total output of the light, which is which is PF, which is photon output, and then you have PPFD, which is density at a spot. So there's PPF, which is total output, and then PPFD, which is at a certain spot. And PPFD can actually be quite misleading because a plant is 3D, and especially if you have a bar light and like the ideal range is about 6 inches away and you're getting great numbers, you move that down a little bit, that number is going to change quite a bit. So it's very difficult to really get a good handle on what the plant is actually using. Because if you think about a giant cola that's here, you might get 1200 here and then 600 here. So PPFD measurements are very difficult. It's best to kind of know the maximum of what the plant is getting. So again, it's color output, the total output, and then the spot measurement. And those all have different acronyms. And then if you think about the colors, there's PAR. And then Dr. Bugbee is doing some very important research about infrared. And his studies show that infrared, in the presence of other colors, does cause photosynthesis at the same or greater rate than other colors. So now we have a decision to make. Do we make a new metric? And the answer is yes, and that's called extended PAR, which is ePar. So ePAR, and that is 400 blue to about 750, which is in the infrared range. And then the metric that we use, which was kind of like before ePar was released. There's a time when everyone is just going crazy with these, but it's coming out like ePar is blue through infrared, and then you have BPAR or PBAR, I've seen it both ways, which is photobiologically active radiation, which is the colors that affect plants, not the colors that actually cause growth. So that is UV to infrared. So, and that's like 300 to like 780 or something. So again, PAR 1970s old, 400 to 700. That's what most PAR meters will give you. Then the ePar, which is new, 400 to about 750. And then BPAR, which is all the colors that affect the plant, 300 to about 800, which is a wider range. So there you go. Those are the three. It's like a grid. You got the types, and you got the colors, and there's all different acronyms. So yeah, you could do what we call, instead of PPFD for biological, it's BPFD. So I think with ePar, it would be like ePPFD. I don't know. So
There's so much.
there's so many.
I think most people just go after PAR or DLI, right?
Yeah,
How much
DLI, yep.
PAR or DLI do you typically recommend for medicinal varieties or
Yeah,
during the different stages of growth?
yeah. I don't really like DLI for indoor just because it's so hard to calculate. As I said before, plants are 3D, and the majority of your plant is not at the top. The majority of it is like halfway down or further. And if you think about measuring DLI outside, makes a lot more sense because if you take a par meter, raise it up above your head, hold it at your chest, it's going to be the same because the sun is very far away. But indoors, if your grow light is here, you're going to get all different numbers going through here. So if you calculate the DLI here, well, what if you're growing bushy plants? Well, then you gotta map it out totally differently. So that kind of just, I like to kind of just say, hey, throw that out the window. Maybe look at the PAR output of the light instead of the PPF rating. Um, and so to give a solid answer, it's really the maximums that you're looking for when you're dealing with a plant. So and the PPFD is more the intensity that it can handle. So in veg, it's about early veg like 200 to 400 ppfd. Then in veg, that's about 4 to 6. Then in flower, it's 8 to 1,000, and that's generally the intensity that it can take. Now, a trick is, as I said before, the distance matters. So if you have a light that's this close and you get 200 ppfd, it's actually getting quite dim. And if you move the meter up a little bit, it might jump up to like 400. So within an inch, you're getting huge variances, right? That's why in seedlings and veg, I like to have the light very far away because that means you move your meter around or the plant goes around, it's not wildly different. And actually, a low reading further away is going to be stronger than that same reading when it's close. Because when it's close and you get 1,000, you move an inch down, it's going to drop down to maybe like 500 or something. If you're far away and you get 1,000, that's really bright because you move an inch down, might go to 900. So it's stronger light and it's more forgiving. So you don't get these wild variances. So that's my tip is try to get those measurements of the light further away, and then the plant will understand it's a brighter light, and you can ramp it up to those higher intensities much faster. Because if you start with your light really close at like 200 ppfd, and you want to ramp that light up, those leaves are going to be pretty wimpy, and you need to grow a whole new set and kind of train it to get to a higher light source. Where if you have something super bright far away, it's going to be used to kind of like a sunlight brightness from that grow light. So that's kind of the answer that I give. I never really use a par meter when growing. It's all feel for me and understanding and watching the plant. Are the leaves turning light green? Is it drooping? You can see in the plant if it has too much or too little light.
You definitely touched upon a little while ago a good reason why to have, number one, an even canopy, right? And number two, even light spread with the grow light,
There
right?
you go.
So
Yeah.
having those two things, as you mentioned, like it's so true. The fact that your bud, the top bud, could be at 800 ppfd, right?
Hmm.
But 4 or 5 inches lower than that, everything else getting 600, 500 ppfd. So it's like there's a big difference. There's two reasons why you should aim for an even light spread and have a grow light that's going to actually emit even light across the entire footprint. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
good call out
Yep.
there.
Yep.
So let's get into, I mean, you touched upon IR. I don't know if there's anything else to be said about IR and how it
Oh,
impacts
there
plant
is.
growth, or UV. To maybe talk to us about those two things, how they,
Sure.
how they're beneficial for plant growth.
Yeah, let's talk about IR first. Here's something actually pretty interesting. So it does a lot of different things. So it's kind of like because it's like infrared is a thing because it's normally not in grow lights or LEDs these days. It's just not. So it's like now we have to talk about how does the plant respond without infrared and then how does it respond with infrared. Well, going back to Emerson effect, it causes a little more growth photosynthetically when you introduce infrared. It's just a fact. So you get more growth, not by like massive leaps and bounds on a photosynthetic level, but you can get leaps and bounds with some other benefits, especially in veg. And the reason for that is it acts upon the plant in several different ways. So first, it will actually cause the leaves to get bigger. So when the leaves get bigger, then the plant is actually absorbing more light. So when you give it infrared, it less becomes the infrared is doing anything. The plant has just grown bigger leaves, so therefore all the light that it gets is going to be greater. So there's that too. If you think about that aspect, and then it also helps with branching, and that will cause more nodes to hit the canopy. So remember what I talked about before in I think it was the capture part, we're talking about different colors. So infrared will go through the leaf along the green light. So if you think about a plant down here, I got the shadow on my hand, there we go. So this would be like more infrared, and that's where the phytochrome receptor that we all learned about comes into play. It's off kilter, and it's like, whoa, I need to reach for the light, right? So if you don't have infrared, that response is just not as strong. So you're getting a plant they're all gonna boom hit the canopy, and you'll get more sites that can get more light. So you're getting more photosynthesis. The leaves are getting bigger, capturing more, and you're getting more nodes hitting to where there is light. So you get this kind of, especially in veg, you get this really nice boost in growth with infrared. And it can cause like people will say infrared causes stretching. Well, like the sun has a huge amounts of infrared and plants grow great out there because it's a balanced spectrum. Or they'll say it's wasted, which is not true anymore because we've proven that infrared does cause great growth and it's photosynthetically active. So if you have infrared in your grow light, it's going to give you those benefits. Not like night and day, but they're there. And especially when you get into having the maximum amount of light, you're going to want other colors to kind of fill that out because you're not maxing out on the other ones. So let's see here. Yeah, so just to recap, you get more growth, leaf expansion, better branching, and overall bigger, faster growing plant, especially in veg.
Okay.
Then UV, right, is next.
Yeah, UV. I mean, there's some actually controversy behind this now. I mean, there's some people saying that there's studies in regards to it increases trichome production, stuff like that, but then there's stuff debunking that. So, what's your take on UV? What do you know about it?
Yeah. So back in the day, when people used UV, it was to stress the plant out to get more trichromes, which it does. So, and I think Dr. Bugby talks about this too. It's stress causes that response. So, yes, if you dose a plant with those old UV fluorescent bulbs, it's going to cause it to stress out and may give you the result that you're looking for. However, you could probably get the same result by giving it drought, giving it heat, those sorts of things. So it's like that becomes less about the UV and more about the stress. And blue light also causes stress in the plant. So that's why I think we're seeing that a little bit. What I know, it's like going back to kind of like think about a whole plate of food. You work the best on a whole plate of food. So if you like don't eat your greens, um, that's you can survive, but will you be like the very best if you don't eat your greens or veggies? No. That's kind of like UV. So it's like a little piece on the plate of food that is there and will help the plant grow better slightly. And I think that's what we're finding is if you include it, disclude it, it's not like night and day difference, but it does help. So what I've seen or heard, I heard, and this is I forget who I was talking to, but in veg, you can get basically like it's a glycogen store, I think, with UV. So it stores, it opens a pathway in veg. So in flour, it'll actually release it with UV. I don't know if that's true or not, but it has benefits in flour and veg that are slight. And I think the key is a little bit goes a long way instead of just trying to stress out the plant with UV. So, and then there's also like UVC, UVB, and UVA. UVC is like cancer causing. I think they were using that to kill coronavirus like way back in the day. Super dangerous. UVB. It's normally not so much in the sun, so that's dangerous too. And UVA is really what you're looking for giving to plants, and you can get a sunburn from it. So there's those the different ranges of UV.
Okay, gotcha. Now, I know you can give too much UV. You can actually do too much light. A lot of people are getting light burn, is often what it's called too. But is there really such thing as light burn, or is it just oftentimes it's said it's just a lack of nutrients? The plant is working harder with the increased lighting intensity, and then there's just a lack of nutrients in the medium, and that people should just increase the nutrients in the medium. So answer that: is there such thing as too much light, or what?
Well, if you think about the sun, it's extraordinarily bright, right? And sometimes the sun will burn your plants outside just because they're not ready for it. Same thing with a grow light. So the way I like to think about it is, as I said before, when you introduce your seedlings to that high light intensity at a far distance, you're training it to get used to that really bright light, right? And if you don't do that, and then you all of a sudden give it like close light range, it's going to fry and burn because those leaves are just not thick and ready for that high amount of light. Like for example, our Electric Sky B3, has what I consider like if you're running that thing max power, I mean, kudos, hats off to you because it's 2000 ppfd here. But if your plant, which is outside sunlight intensity, but if your plant is able to handle that, which some growers, like they've trained their plants very well, they're very healthy, they're not going to have a problem with it. So but when you get to those levels, you're just stressing the crap out of the plant. So like think mistakes just happen faster. So if you're cramming the plant with tons of light, can you handle mistakes? Is it going to run out of water? Are your nutrients in check? Like, is it the healthiest that it can be? Because if it's not, you're going to fall off a cliff and it's going to start to get damaged. Once you get a little bit of damage, then boom. So I would say unless you know, you can get too much light depending on your environment, and that's where CO2 comes in. So the plant can actually handle more of it, and you get a curve of where more light doesn't get you the same results anymore. So, and especially, is there too much light for a new grower? Like absolutely, like a 1,000 watt LED grow light, like actually 1,000 watts in a 4x4 is going to roast probably like everything if you run it full power. You know what I mean? So it's like too much for that person, and then can't. Are you actually going to get more yield with that? Or is it wasted? That's kind of where I would go in my mind.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's talk about new science in regards to lighting. So, it seems like we're finding out things, more and more new things are happening, right, within science. What
Yep.
new science in regards to lighting for plants has come out in the past year or so?
Yeah, the Dr. Bugbee with the infrared, that's pretty big. With actually proving it. Fluence actually did a study about our favorite medicinal plant, showing they gave it a baseline, and like this is actual like yield in the medicinal plant. They did a baseline of light, then added like this much white light or this much infrared, and the infrared you can see like a sizable gain over white light, which is actually pretty cool. So not only does it photosynthetically active, but they showed there is a slight gain, and they just did that in flower. So you're not, it did not recognize any of the benefits that you might get in veg, like because usually with infrared you get a bigger plant. So it didn't study that aspect. It was just flower. So they showed that, which is exciting. Um, I think it's harder to find breakthroughs because if you think about it, many years ago, we didn't think green light caused growth. We didn't think infrared caused growth, and now we're there. So now it's kind of like, okay, you're getting into the nitty gritty of like UV, and you're going to get lots of conflicting plant science articles. Like what I found is sometimes you can run the same experiment twice and you get different results because something else is off. So I think we're just going to find the fine tune of, what, where, and, there's so many things you can study. So really kind of we're getting to the end of understanding a lot of what light does.
I was going to say, what do you see happening with plant lighting over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I don't think efficiency is going to be that. I think we're there in terms of efficiency. Um, and, your plant doesn't understand efficiency, right? So I think, a lot of people are caught up in like a number that's advertised and the home grower, like, I don't even know how many watts my refrigerator pulls from the wall. So it's like, there, there's that. It's like, is your refrigerator more efficient than your grow light? Like, who knows? It's using this much, so that I think has become less important. I'm not actually sure because it seems like, there's this, more wattage, more efficiency. Um, I think we're going to see just different brands do different things with their lighting and maybe a consolidation there, but kind of seems like everyone's doing the same thing. So we'll see how long that can last. I'm not sure.
Yeah, people are so nitpicky when it comes to the efficiency. I mean, it was like, 2.8, 2.9 micromoles per joule, and then a light will come out where it's like 3.0, and it's like
Hmm.
you're comparing prices like 2.8 micromoles per joule, 3.0. It's like, do I want to pay the extra $300 for that 3.0? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like,
it's like
it's
yeah,
crazy how like people are
point
so nitpicky and they want the best of the best as far as efficiency.
yeah, point one at that's like 3% difference.
Oh,
That's not a
really?
lot.
Okay.
Yeah, like what's the difference? Could you do three 3.0 difference between 2.8? Yeah, that's not very much. Like
Not
between
much of
like
a
5 and
difference.
7%. So yeah, and then at that point it's like output and like even lights at different output ranges. So if you get like 10 more watts here, yeah, it's and even measuring the light is so confusing too. I mean, you can put it into a sphere, you can do a map, but all those, it's really at the end of the day yield. And actually, what's fascinating is, and here's another tidbit is, it's like a red and blue light is like the most efficient grow light. You can get like I think up to 4 UMOL, right? So, and like if you look at a spectral chart and you see it has a lot of blue, the blue is really efficient too. So, and even Dr. Bugby even said in a previous video that red is 30% more efficient at creating growth. So if you're looking at a UMOL and you're like, man, this one's a higher UMOL, but it has more blue than this one, well, what's the plant going to think, right? It's not reality. It's you can get a better reading on paper, and then plant growth is just not something you can like say or like give it a number. So that's something to think about too. So look for that blue spike. The higher the blue spike, higher the red spike. You're concentrating energy in those two areas, and it's going to be more efficient, but it might not always translate to plant growth.
That makes sense. So, are we going to see any new or updated grow lights from the Green Sunshine Company in 2022 or what?
Maybe we're working on a few things. Nothing to directly replace what we have going on now with the 300s and 180s, but perhaps around when this video is released, something will be around the corner. I hope so. We're trying to do something a little different than everybody else as always. But yeah.
Cool. So, kind of wrapping things up, how can the listeners find you? And is there anything you got upcoming in the future that you want to talk about? Or
Let's see. Visitors can find us on our website, thegreenssunshineco.com. We just have our new We did a revamp of our grow kits, so that's exciting. So we've got grow kits with earth dust. We haven't talked about nutrients at all, but earth dust is our amendments that you add to soil. It's got everything you need. It's got all the microbes in there, so it makes it super easy to grow. We're just going to continue doing that. And then you can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and also Mr. Grow's channel right here.
Awesome. Well, I'll be sure to link your channel down in the description section below and also the website as well. Coupon code Mr. Grow It will get you a percentage off, right? So that's still active.
That's right. It is still
So if
active.
anybody, yeah, so Earth Dust, you can save on that. You can save on, I think, anything on your website. I believe that
Yeah,
Mr. Grow It
anything on the
coupon code
website. We
works
got
on.
kits, lights, and nutrients.
Sweet. So that all will be linked down in the description section below. If you enjoyed this video, click that thumbs up button. Try to get as many thumbs up as possible. That helps with the YouTube algorithm. Hopefully more and more people will view these videos. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Every single weekend, I'm releasing a new Garden Talk podcast episode. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating and review. I'm coming up to 200. I've been saying that for a while, 200 reviews. So if you guys are on Apple Podcasts tuning in through that, I would greatly appreciate if you left a rating or review to help get us to our goal of 200. Dan, this has been awesome, man. This is there's so much to know about lighting for sure, and you definitely touched upon some things that haven't been touched upon on this channel, or I guess on your channel too, you said. So good to have you here and release some new information to the people.
All right. See you later, man. Good talking with you again.
Yeah, good talking to you. See y'all. Take care.